Hey everybody, welcome to the Lent Project, and this is a Lent Project perspective, and I'm joined by my friend Matt Maher, who is in Nashville this morning. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, we're really glad to have you. For those of you that don't know Matt, Matt is a songwriter and worship leader. You even if you don't know Matt, you know the songs that he's written. I'll give you a link to his website on the blog, and I'd love for everybody to go and check out his music. It's amazing. But Matt, you and I don't think that we could have more different childhoods, upbringings in the church. Matt is a practicing Catholic, and I'd love for you to just tell us kind of what that was like for you as a kid and how that's kind of developed for you over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think like most Catholics, you grow up in a faith system that is so old, it's literally part of the culture.
Hmm.
So where I grew up in the Northeast, you know, and it wasn't just Catholicism. It was really mainline Christianity, all its different denominations.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Catholicism had a special place because it was old. It was the oldest established one. But you kind of grow up with all these traditions and things that you do, and you go to mass, and you go to Sunday school, and you learn about God. But the way in which you learn it involves things that are typically prayers or
Hmm.
rituals that developed from traditions from hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 or 1,500 or 1,800 years ago. So, and what that looks like is when you're a kid, you don't really get to learn the depth of something.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like holding up a rock, and you go, well, when you're a kid, you're like, this is a rock. But if you talk to a geologist, it's like it's more than just like he knows the formation and how it was made and how it came together, and he can look at it and say, oh, there's elements of all these different minerals and stuff in it, and shades, and for him, it's this beautiful sort of reality. It's like an amalgamation of so many things. But so for me, growing up, I didn't really have that. I didn't really have that understanding. And when I was 20, I moved to the States, had a real strong conversion, met Catholics who were sort of more, I guess, sort of evangelistic or evangelical in their
Yeah.
nature, emphasized having a relationship with Christ. And so for me, then what happened is like when I was a kid, I'd look back at my memories going like, looking at stuff like, well, Advent, it was about having a calendar and you opened up these little cardboard flaps, and occasionally you'd get on one and there was like a piece of chocolate and you're like, Eureka! And then, and Lent was always like, it was a gloomy time. I don't know if it's because it's the time of year, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
spring hasn't really hit yet, and so all of a sudden you show up and they put ashes on your forehead and they're like, you're dust and you're going to die. All I can think of is Dust in the Wind by Kansas. And,
That's
you know,
awesome.
yeah. And there's, people are like, well, what are you going to give up? And it's just like, I don't know. And so there's just all this stress about like, well, what am I going to give up? It's got to be something meaningful, or it's got, and I think, there could be a real tendency that you just don't get a chance to kind of go below the surface of it and,
Yeah.
and, and go and ask the question of, well, why? Why am I doing these things? Why would I do these things? And,
Yeah.
and I think for me, as somebody who really came to know Jesus when I was 19, 20, I kind of went back and said, okay, I'm an adult now. So if I'm gonna do this thing, if I'm gonna be a Catholic, I want to know why. And there's two levels of that. There's the why of why the church professes those things, but there's also the why of like, well, why do you believe?
Yeah.
And so that's really what it's been for me. It's been a journey into kind of rediscovering all of these things and sort of being able to come to it from a personal level.
That's really cool. And now, I mean, I think more so than almost anybody, Matt, since you've got this background in a liturgical world that I don't necessarily have growing up in a Southern Baptist tradition. But then now, you interact with so many people from this more evangelical, modern worship world that I'd love to know what your thoughts are for the Lent season, specifically for everybody that's journeying with us. How can we take this ancient tradition that has a lot of rituals and it has a lot of things that, like you said, they may look like that rock? How do we take that and translate it into something that's meaningful for our daily lives?
Well, I think it's kind of like if you want to know what if you want to know what your journey's supposed to like, it's a good idea to know your destination.
Hmm.
And so I was reading on your blog this morning, and I think it's right. You really what your destination is well, it's really Easter, but
Right.
before that, it's Good Friday.
Yep.
And and so what I always tell people, it's like, Friday's a good day. It is a Good Friday, but it's also a really sorrowful day because it's this dichotomy because we celebrate the fact that Jesus, it was a once and for all sacrifice for our sin. He died on the cross.
Yeah.
But it's also God showing love and giving up his only son. And so for me as a believer, it's always about, I would love to be able to go further into the depths of what Jesus did for me
Hmm.
so that I could be more grateful. And so, there's the obvious significance of Lent, meaning 40, and it's 40 days, symbolizing really the 40 days that Jesus was in the desert, but it's really the 40 years that Israel was wandering,
Yeah.
and he's the fulfillment of every promise in the Old Testament. Like every promise that God made, he is the complete fulfillment of it. He's really the fulfillment of every promise in the Bible. So, what I tell people is if the cross is the most significant act, if it's the greatest display of the sovereign grace of God on the earth, it makes sense to me that you would take a little bit more time than maybe the Friday morning of Good Friday to kind of prepare yourself for the service that night.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes sense that you would dwell on that mystery a little bit more than just the hour on the Good Friday service that year. So what Lent really is about that journey of Jesus in the desert, but also the journey of Israel being in the desert. It's realizing that we're pilgrims in life, and to get from here to another place, you got to be willing to go on a pilgrimage. You got to walk. Certain things in life that there aren't shortcuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, my encouragement to people, regardless of denomination, is, take the time to, carve out space. It's not about giving up stuff for Lent as much as it is about making more room for God. And so, but in order to make room for God, sometimes there are little trivial pleasures in our life. Whether it's this guy that occupies most of our time now.
Yeah.
And making a decision, saying, what, for these 40 days before Good Friday, when I'm with people, to be more present to them, I'm going to not look at this thing at all.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's an opportunity to really, ask for grace to help improve your character. But it's also about making room so that when you get to Good Friday, when you get to the cross, when you get to that celebration, you start to, your eyes open more and more, that you would see the full gift of what God has given you through the cross.
Yeah.
And then when you walk into Easter, there's just that much more room for joy. There's that much more room for grace. There's that much more room for mercy,
Yeah.
So, for me, that's what Lent is now. And so I encourage every believer, to, obviously, I think what you guys are doing with the Book of Common Prayer, it's a great start. It's simple. It's laid out, and I think doing that little consistency every day will kind of help you remember that you are on a journey from here to the cross.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love what you're saying because I think there's two important pieces to recognizing the depth of Christ's sacrifice, and one is just dwelling on that and remembering that. Mm-hmm. But I think the other side is really going to the depths of who we are and the depths of the things that He came to rescue and redeem us from. And that's not necessarily a fun place to be for 40 days, but it is a good thing to do because you can't surrender something unless you fully know what it is. So, man, thank you so much for that. I think it's a great encouragement to all of us.
Thank you very much.
All right, Matt, take care, and everybody will see you tomorrow morning for the Lent Project.